This is the inaugural podcast.
You guess? No, it is. What do you
is.
mean you guess?
I don't know. Maybe if this takes off, they want to interview Mike or somebody first.
Fucking A. All right. You guess.
This is
the first time.
the first podcast of People You Should Know, my own personal name,
Oh.
which I like. It's a good name. And the first person on this is Jondan Ziskin.
John, thank you for having me today.
Oh my God, I hate you so much.
You don't watch podcasts. Or listen to them, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I also don't have a publicist that tells me what to tell everybody. So.
You just be professional. It's not too hard.
Why do I want to be professional?
Why? Because it's that's how you build an audience, make this entertaining. Start over again. We're good.
We're
talking too much about the podcast.
I already said it.
All right, this is all behind the scenes bullshit.
Anyways.
Yeah.
So you have a record coming out.
I do.
It's mastering right now, correct? Have you sent it to mastering or?
We are in the process of getting it mastered right now, putting on the final touches in the mix, and then we are sending it to Sterling Sound to get it mastered.
So did you decide to send it to Sterling then?
We are sending it to Sterling. They have done like all these like top 40 albums. Most recently, Taylor Swift's Reputation. I think
right up your alley.
Yeah, exactly. So Taylor Swift, Beyonce, me.
So the real question
all the same type of music there.
When this is released, are you gonna make the music video with the Taylor Swift bodysuit?
With the Taylor Swift body, I was gonna do more of. I don't know if you saw her last one, but it's her pretty much dancing like a gorilla in a hotel lobby.
Actually, I hadn't seen that.
It's actually a pretty cool music video.
Yeah.
It's for Delicate.
Maybe that's what all your albums should be, is just like really lasting images from Taylor Swift music videos.
Just all that, like each scene is a new Taylor Swift music video.
Yeah, like every time like you put out a press release, it's a different picture of you doing something Taylor Swift did.
That
might actually be a really good idea.
I think that's what Bryan Adams should have done when he put out all the cover Taylor Swift songs. He should have just like gotten in the blonde wig and made all of the.
Which one? I always forget. Brian and Ryan Adams.
It could be Ryan Adams. I'm not sure.
Which is the one?
You know what? I think it was Ryan Adams. I think Brian Adams was the
Brian
guy from
Adams
the 80s.
is from the 90s.
Yeah.
Who does everything.
That's right. Yeah. Fuck that one up.
So, considering that no one knows exactly your whole history. Actually, I don't even know everything.
Yeah, well, now's a good time.
Where are you from originally?
I was born in New York City, and then I moved out to Long Island because it's mandatory if you're Jewish. They make you go out there.
That was more Italian.
A lot of Jews where I grew up. So I ended up growing up in Long Island, and my musical career started when I was about...
We're in Long Island, though.
We're in Long Island?
You can't just say Long Island.
Oh, so it's in Greenvale. Nobody knows where that is. It's right by Roslyn on the North Shore of Long Island. Trust me, unless you're a Long Island person, you don't care.
Okay, but how far out of the city is it? How far out of
Do you want directions to my old house?
I'm just wondering. I'm trying to get some more specificity instead of just like.
All right, so you take
you
take the LIE to exit 39.
No, how close?
I was about 40 minutes away from the city.
Okay, yeah. So that's not too far away from the Nassau-Queens border.
I was on Nassau. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was probably 20 minutes away from Queens. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I don't want it to be like you say you're from Long Island and then people are like, oh, you must be close to New York and you lived out in Montauk or something.
No, I did not live in Montauk.
It's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different.
I'm really glad we spent 30 seconds on that.
So,
God, the worst interview.
You were just throwing me off.
I'm sorry.
No. This is good. This will be good.
Okay.
Despite you. I had
Wonderful.
to pick you first.
Yeah.
So, how long did you live out there then? Just your entire childhood, or did you move around?
So no, we same house. I think we moved there when I was about 5-6 years old. We stayed there until parents sold the house a couple years ago. So while I was in college, I'd go home to that house. Yeah. Wow. Then we all moved out to Brooklyn.
Oh, that's right, because you guys aren't that far away right now.
Yeah, no, it wasn't too far. I mean, so I went to school in upstate New York, and then graduated in 3 years, and immediately got an apartment in Greenpoint, and started doing music in the city.
Yeah.
And
you went to Binghamton, right?
I did go to Binghamton, yes.
How was that? You got a math degree.
Yeah.
Right?
So the idea was that I was really good at math and music. I actually wrote my college entry essay on the relationship between numbers and music, which was kind of interesting. And I was always a mathematical person, and so I decided, music. Binghamton didn't have that great of a music program, so it was like I loved music, studying it on my own, and I would, treat it like it was its own course. But in the meantime, I thought it was a better idea to get a degree in math, just in case, music wasn't financially feasible for me, that I had a career to go into.
Okay.
So
does it mean you were a good student then?
I was. I had a lot of potential.
Just ended with that noise.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was I was always a bright kid, but I just didn't really try as hard as I should. I smoked a lot of pot in high school and just didn't really care, and it came to bite me in the ass a little bit later. I probably should have gone to a better school than Binghamton. Not that Binghamton's a terrible school, but if I had applied myself, I probably could have been like straight A student instead. I was like kind of middle of the road B student. So
that's very similar to me,
yeah.
Except for the pot smoking part. I was just lazy.
Yeah.
Didn't give a shit.
Yeah, me either.
So I actually had me and a friend walked into my history teacher's class once, like afterwards to say hi, and he said, "Oh, there goes the two most underachieving people in school."
I once had a chemistry teacher who said to me, after I handed in a project, he said, "No one could have done as well as you did on this, and put in as little amount of work as you did," which I took as a huge compliment. Yeah. I was really happy that day. And
did it just have to do with interest level?
It was more just the level of laziness plus a little bit of depression in high school. It was just like typical. I don't know if it's typical, but I went through like a little bit of like an emo nihilistic phase. I read a lot of Chuck Palahniuk, and I'm like, nothing matters. And no, it was I wasn't like goth or anything. I didn't have like the makeup or even the thing I always found interesting about that is like, if life doesn't matter, what the fuck are you getting all the makeup on and dressing in black? Like, it's a lot of effort. Yeah. The whole point is if life doesn't matter and you're a nihilist, then it's like you just don't do anything. You don't cut your hair. Right. You just wear the shitty Gap clothing just to get that done with quickly. You don't. So. But it was a combination of a little bit of, teenage angst plus laziness. And so I didn't really value education as much as I do today. I didn't have as much of a purpose in what I was doing at the time, other than music. Music was the one thing that I was really interested in that time. And I focused all my energy into that and didn't care as much for school.
So I take it that your parents aren't like musical, right?
No.
Like Ricky doesn't have a strange secret life as a piano player.
He does not. The music does not run in my family, with a couple of exceptions. My grandfather's brother played mandolin, which is a weird. Like,
every part of that sentence was getting weirder.
Yeah, my grandfather's brother was a mandolin player, and my father's brother, my uncle, he passed a little while ago, but he was a singer-songwriter. He had a great voice. He was the only one, as far as I know, who had any musical talent in the family. And my grandfather used to sing a little bit. He did a good Frank Sinatra.
But not like, nobody like did any serious study, really?
No, not really. No one was classically trained. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you actually start getting into music?
So that started when I was about 4 years old. My parents saw me just like tapping around on surfaces around the house, so they bought me a little toy drum. And I took the toy drum to Thanksgiving that year, and the whole family went crazy because I wouldn't stop pounding on it. It was just a snare drum that like wrapped around with the little string. So I had it. I was walking around with it all day and just tap, 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 tap. Yeah, the entire day. So my parents, like, they would try to take the drum away from me, and I'd be very upset, and I'd start crying. They'd give it back to me. So they're like, we gotta focus this energy into something else. They didn't want me doing drums, so they put me into piano instead.
Oh, so that was their move.
Yeah, so they
baller move.
there was a piano teacher down the street named Miss Schulman, Elsie Schulman, who I took piano lessons with her from when I was about 5 to 13, 14, 15, around early teenage years. Pretty consistently once a week for 11 years. So I was classically trained. We did a lot of classical music. I played Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms. Yeah. My favorite was Rachmaninoff. He had a Prelude in C-sharp minor.
Can you still play that stuff?
I can not nearly as much as I used to. I let it go, unfortunately. Every now and then I go back and I just like try to play a little bit from memory, and then I'll look at the sheet music and get it, but then it kind of goes away. But when I was 13, I also started playing acoustic guitar as well. And so that started with just like me wanting to learn guitar, and so I bought a guitar, bought a DVD, learned from a DVD. Eventually got into lessons, but the funny story behind that was when I was 13, I apparently jumped from hobby to hobby, and nobody was taking any of it seriously. And so when I finally said I wanted to play guitar, my dad took me to Guitar Center to get a guitar, and he wanted to just get the cheapest kind because he's like, this is going to be another, another hobby that doesn't go anywhere. And so I'm left-handed. The right-handed guitars cost about $30 for the starter kit. The left-handed guitars cost about $100. And so my dad's like, we're just going to get you the right-handed guitar. You're never going to play it again. And meanwhile, I've been playing it now for over 15 years, and actually about 13 years now at this point. I've been writing songs and about to put out an album that's mostly acoustic guitar.
Yeah, mostly guitar.
And so any shortcomings I have in guitar, I blame on him. And it's a nice way to absolve myself of any responsibility for my skill.
Funny how much you play guitar in general. Because when I first met you, you didn't play that much guitar.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of did it like for maybe... Because when we had those sets, they were only like maybe 1 or 2 guitar charts for a while.
Yeah, so I started songwriting around like 14, 15, and it was mostly piano because I was just a lot better at piano. So I'd only been playing guitar for about a year at that point, so I was still kind of figuring out how to do that like James Taylor type finger picking and really learning to actually play it well. I didn't want to write poorly, so I started on piano, and because I was like, that angsty teenager that I was talking about, a lot of the music was pretty dark. I had thematically and musically there, was a lot of dark lyrics about, depressing stories of. I wrote a song about like protesting war, and I wrote a song about what was it? How called "Let's Make a Movie," about how life is just kind of a pointless movie that goes on. I mean, it was
Jesus.
Yeah, it was just like it was.
See, what's funny is I remember playing those, and I never thought.
Yeah, they were written when I was like 16, 17, and it was all like this nihilistic stuff. And I was listening to like emo bands like Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy and Jack's Mannequin and all these emo bands that just kind of influenced the darkness of my music. And it wasn't, as I got older and matured, I started to just kind of grow out of that, and by the time I got into my 20s, I was actually a pretty happy person and like got out of my depression.
Yeah, we would not have been friends.
Yeah, I don't know, probably not. Yeah, but once I was in my 20s and living on my own, and living in Brooklyn, I started to enjoy my life a lot more, and I started to write a lot more on guitar than piano, because at that point I'd been playing for a long time on guitar, and so I was just able to channel happiness, and a lot of my guitar songs are more like love songs, and they're a lot sweeter, and they're definitely a little bit more timid because there isn't that like angry emo energy to them for sure.
Who was your guy? Like when you were first, like who was the first guy that you were listening to a lot then? Would it be in those emo bands that would like?
Those were the first. Yeah, I mean, so the bands that started, the one musician that like got me into writing music was Andrew McMahon, who was in the band I mentioned, Jack's Mannequin and Something Corporate. He was like this. He was this like emo piano rocker, which was something that I'd never seen before. When I thought like piano music, I thought like Billy Joel or Elton John.
Exactly.
And so
happy and gay. I didn't, and I love Billy Joel, but that was never a style that I was going to write. But then I heard this guy who was writing music that was, it had electric guitar in it, it was rocking, and it was piano led, and that was cool because, piano, at least when I was younger, I was, I got made fun of for taking piano lessons. It was kind of like a sissy instrument, and to see this guy who was... Go to a stereotype of a high school? Like, I never had these issues when
I
was in high
I
school.
had some of them, yeah, a little bit. I mean, you take piano lessons, you're so gay. Like, I had that type of shit going on. But I didn't care. I loved it. Yeah. So, but it was cool to see this, he was like an 18-year-old kid when his band got signed. And, like, he would like, just hop up on the piano. And he'd just be, like, slamming on the keys. And he was treating it like a rock star. Like, the rock stars would, like, break their guitars. He'd, like, kick over his piano. And it was...
End of every show, he'd kick it over.
I don't know if he did it at the end of every show. But he was just, like, standing on the piano. And he was really rocking out. And so that was a main influence for me in my piano music. And then The Fray as well was one of those bands too, like kind of like emo piano rock that kind of inspired me. Guitar wise, though, definitely like early John Mayer stuff that I started getting into, like Room for Squares, heavier things. And you can definitely see those influences in a couple of my songs for sure.
Those songs, definitely.
Yeah, but that just I loved his style, and it was simple. The music was always so complex, but it felt really simple. And same with his lyrics. It was always I loved how he could explain things in a way that was really interesting and specific, but it was also so very universal.
Is that how you start? I mean, did you start writing? Because you write lyrics really well.
Thank you.
And like I was talking to Caitlin about this, about how like you have lyrical hooks at the beginning. Like your verses, I can always remember the first line of your songs and your verses, which is hard. There's not a lot of people that can do that.
Yeah.
Like not even like Billy Joel, you can't remember the first lines of all his like hit songs.
Right.
But like, is that how you started getting into lyric writing? Because
Yeah,
that to me, like I come from a music writing background in college and studying jazz and stuff like that, and starting to write lyrics with Lindistry was like really hard.
Lyric writing is the toughest part, and I kind of had this mentality about it when I was like 15, 16, just starting to write. The music always came first with me. I would always come up with a just something that caught my ear musically that I wanted to experiment with. And when it came to time to write lyrics, I just kind of in the beginning, I just gave myself permission for it to be really shitty, and knowing that it was shitty. And so it was the sort of thing where I was just like, all right, I'm going to write right now. I know a lot of this isn't going to be good, but I want to try to find my voice. And when it came time to figuring out like what lyrics worked, I always kind of thought as a song as like, how would I describe this? Like basically a song is like a full story with a beginning, middle, and end, and that I one of the things I see with a lot of people who just try to write music is that a lot of what they do is just making the words sound good. It's a lot about phonetics. Yeah. It's a lot about using similar lines that have gone into these places before. But it was really important to me when I was writing that the lyrics led into each other and were a story, so that, you know, there wouldn't just be a random line here that was just taking up space. It all kind of had to mean something. And that was a big influence from John Mayer especially. I mean, just the way he writes and how every line is memorable and how he's able to put a story together. And, I mean, just there are certain hooks in songs that just catch you, like in, you know, he has in Daughters, she's just like a maze where all the walls are continually changed. And I love that line because it's so specific, but it says so much and it's so easily relatable. Yeah. So when it did came time to writing lyrics, I started by putting mini songs together. I would never finish anything. I would write like a verse here and I wouldn't know where to go with it, or I would write a chorus and a bridge but never have any way of connecting it. And so I had about like a dozen mini songs, and I was getting really frustrated because I couldn't finish any of them. And so I finally decided I'm just going to write a really bad song. I'm just going to get one out completely. It was called He Can Save Her. It was the shittiest song ever. I still know it. I could play it. It's so
He Can
Save Her. It's like this gooey, awful romantic song, and it's so cliche. I mean, it's awful now. But it felt good just to like write it all together and to finish it. And I was able to look at it and I was like, okay, most of this is garbage, but here are the things I like. And as I started to write more, it really became about like trimming the fat and getting rid of as much stuff that I thought was bad and really trying to have as much of it to be as meaningful as possible. And it got to a point where I was always trying to outdo myself with lyrics and you know, if a line wasn't working, it was just hammering away at it and changing it until it did and not being satisfied with a crappy line, because things like that can ruin songs when it can take you out completely. And it's not even something sometimes that you notice, but you're just like, oh, this sounds like everything else I've ever heard, and you just kind of forget about it.
There are guys that have gone away with it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I knew a piano bar guy who would always stop in the middle of Your Song by Elton John.
Yeah. And
he would say, so you just heard one really beautiful chorus and one really beautifully written verse. Now just listen. And it's when Elton John says something, 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 but then again, no, and just kind of says these stupid fragments of ideas.
Right.
Ever since he said that, I've not respected that song the same way. Like, you can't look at it the same way when you realize it's just like...
Is the third verse lacking?
I think it's the third verse that's lacking.
Yeah. Same with the third verse. It's not nearly as bad, but the third verse of Bridge Over Troubled Water. Sail on
Oh yeah.
Silverbird.
Well, because Paul Simon hated it.
Well, that's true. He didn't even want to write it.
But yeah,
It's about Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, and there's like, as much as I love it, like most of Paul McCartney's solo work is like incomplete. Like it's half of really good lyrics and half.
Well, to be fair, I mean, try having everybody tell you you're a genius for 20 years and then you write a song. I mean,
yeah,
I'd half-ass it too. At that point.
So you went to Binghamton.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to go to New York?
That was more of, I was still.
Is it just because? I mean, it's just because you already.
It was more of a
kind of knew about it.
It was more of a money thing than anything, actually, because my brother had gone to UVM and that was pretty expensive, and
UVM.
University of Vermont.
Oh. I didn't know they had one.
Yeah, they did. State school, but during my senior year when I was applying, I again was like so into my own head and not really interested in my life that much, and so I just threw out a couple of names of schools I wanted to go to, and Binghamton, my father actually was like, you should apply there. It's cheap, and so I applied there. I applied to Maryland, a couple other Delaware, a couple other places I don't really remember. I wasn't too interested in school, frankly. My grades were so. But I did get into Binghamton, and when it came time to choose a school, I visited a couple campuses. Didn't really love any of them, so I was just like, Binghamton's like a cheap way of doing this. Like I didn't want to. It was around the time of the financial crash, so like I didn't. My dad was like pushing me, like, come on, go to this place.
Like cheap one, yeah.
Right, like in school tuition, like, it's not like I was like dead set on like going to Berkeley or something. Like I didn't even apply there. So I just decided, Binghamton made the most sense, and I ended up getting out of there in 3 years. And, just while I was there, I took a voice lesson class. I took like music editing classes outside of the math stuff.
Did you go into theory?
I didn't take theory. I took theory with a private teacher when I was 16.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when I started writing music, my parents, saw that I was doing this, and they're like, "Do you want to learn a little bit more about music?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I just stopped taking formal piano lessons because I was kind of bored with the classical music. I probably should have stayed in a little longer. I might have gotten a little better, but they took me to this like songwriting academy place that was in Long Island. I can't remember the name of it even, but it's similar. It almost looks like those like School of Rock buildings they have now. Yeah, it was like one of those. But I worked with a teacher, and you asked me like too about lyrics, and that was kind of I learned a lot from him, where we broke down "I Want to Hold Your Hand" by the Beatles. We broke down a lot of different songs, just how the lyrics match the music. We did a lesson on Penny Lane, which was really interesting, and he talked about how when Paul McCartney changes keys from A to B, it happens on the lyric "Very Strange," and it's an unexpected change that happens while he's saying "Very Strange," and it just feels right musically. It goes together and creates an atmosphere, and that's kind of where I learned about how to match feeling with lyric, and to really, you want it all to come together to create a feeling. And whenever I would write, I know we're going back to what we were talking about before, but when I would write, I was always looking, when I would come up with a piece of music, I would say like, what does this feel like? And then go from there and start trying to put lyrics together. But to answer your question, yeah, there wasn't too much thought about going into Binghamton. It was just,
So when
cheap
coming
school.
to New York, it was just, you're going to come to New York?
Yeah, well, coming to New York, I was coming home, and the talk was about like Brooklyn and Williamsburg and how this place was like
going to be the artist.
Yeah, where all these young people were moving to. And, instead of having to move back into my parents' house, I was like, rather go out there. So when
did you move?
I graduated college in 3 years. So I graduated college in, was it 11? Wait, no. It was in summer of 2012 I graduated.
Okay.
And so then I was at home for about 6 months, and I started math tutoring. So I'd do like teach SAT courses. And then I moved in December. I got my first apartment in Greenpoint.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow.
so December of 2012 I've been here. Been about 5-6 years, yeah.
Yeah. You've been a couple years more than me.
Yeah.
I thought we moved like closer to the same time, but I guess not.
No, I was here since 2012.
Yeah.
And I started doing open mics at a place called Bar 4. That's since closed down, which I love that place. That was in, I think it was in Prospect Park or Park Slope. I can't remember the difference.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Same shit.
Right, but I started doing open mics there, and then that's when I just started kind of looking to get shows and playing all over the place, and
That was an interesting time.
Yeah, I do have to ask about Liaisons.
Oh, Liaisons.
Yeah, well, because that's kind of, that's how we met.
That's right.
And it was doing pretty well for a while.
It was, yeah. We were doing pretty great. So
then talk about why did you start a group in general? Did you just want a vehicle?
Yeah, that was mostly, so it was the end of 2012, and in 2013, I was like, all right, I got to start recording. I had flirted with recording myself in my garage, but I didn't know anything about production. I bought this big book, and I didn't bother to read it. I was never interested in the production side. So I got to Brooklyn, and I started looking up studios, and there was one close by to me called Shifted Studio. This guy, Pat, who ran it, it was this small place. It was like this tiny little closet of a studio, but I just wanted to go there just to record like 2 demos of my songs. And the plan was to just kind of, use these demos to reach out to people and see if anybody wanted to play with a band with me. At the time, the music really called for a band. I was on piano, and I had that Jack's Mannequin idea in mind where I'd be like the piano rocker. It'd be me on piano, electric guitars, bass drums behind me. So I recorded 2 of my songs called Rock Bottom and Lonely Gun. And I did those in the studio, I think in about a month. It didn't take too long. And I put those up on Craigslist. And Craigslist is basically how I found everybody. I found you. We started originally with this other drummer named Louise, who I met through a friend, but we had, I met Ryan, who who played guitar. We had a bassist named Will. And we started practicing in this warehouse space.
Yeah. Back when it was an actual warehouse
Yeah,
space.
exactly.
Now you guys have made it. Like, I can almost not believe that this is the same space we have.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of crazy.
It's insane.
But we played in this warehouse space, and we started playing shows, I think, end of 2013, beginning of 2014. And that's about when you came on board, right? Around 2014?
Yeah, I moved. I, officially moved. Because I was here for a month before I had to fly back to Seattle. Or I was actually here for a week before I had to fly back to Seattle. But June 2014,
right.
I guess.
So, yeah, we started playing with you, and then I've always wanted to go in, make an album, or make an EP, and at the time I was just saving as much money as I can from tutoring. I mean, my schedule was kind of crazy. It would be I would tutor, after school hours from 3 to 8, then go to open mics or play shows. Find time to go during the studio during the day or at night if people worked, so it was difficult. But basically, we recorded this EP. I think it took us about 4 or 5 months, if I remember. It was a 6-song EP, and it came out all right. I mean, I didn't know anything about production at the time, so we recorded drums last. A really terrible mistake.
Well, and you also you had drum tracks. With
we did.
I did. I remember that.
Yeah, we had recorded drums with our original drummer, and then he ended up leaving because just the schedule wasn't working out. And his style, he's a great drummer, but he was like a percussionist. He played marimba. He played all these other instruments. The actual drum kit was more of his secondary instrument, and so we brought you on, and you listened to the drum tracks and you're like, I'm changing all this. And so you re-recorded, I think, more than half the drums on the EP. And we ended up putting out this EP, and we put on a big show in this warehouse that my dad owns. We kind of we cleared it out, and it was like an old rusty warehouse space, but it was cool because it was Brooklyn, and we had beer kegs, and it was a fun time. And then from there, we started playing a lot of shows in the city. We were playing the Bitter End fairly regularly. We were playing Bowery Electric.
We were kind of on a decent track.
Yeah,
it wasn't too much longer. Because I remember the first show that I really remember people being at was when we did Trash Bar a couple months before it closed.
Yeah.
And there was a ton of people for whatever reason. And then we did a couple of Bitter End gigs, and then we started recording.
That's right.
Again. We started recording again with Ryan.
Yeah, we went back into the studio in early 2015. With the studio, I don't even remember the name of the studio, but I wasn't super thrilled with the production or with what we were even recording. I had changed so much in the time from the songs that we had recorded for the EP and we'd been playing. I was 22, 3 at the time. I'd written these songs when I was 16, and I felt like I was really outgrowing them, and so. At the time I was writing a lot more on guitar than I was on piano. And, we started recording these 2 songs that are
one of which now appears on my album.
Yeah,
but,
we saw the bass and a couple electric guitar tracks
right,
from it.
We do, but it just didn't feel right. I never even gotten around to finishing them in the real studio. And by I think it was October of 2015, we played our last show as the Liaisons.
At the bitter end.
Yeah, we played at the bitter end, and we got a recording of that show, and I listened to it, and I had just gotten frustrated with the difficulty of being in a band with people who had different schedules. We were all working. It was very tough to keep up the pace. Ryan was getting more into his job, and he just gotten promotions, and he's doing really well for himself. But it was very difficult to get all of us to commit to do it at the same time, and it just I didn't feel like this was the music I wanted to be doing anymore, and I was gearing myself more towards doing acoustic stuff, and that's really what this album became. And so it wasn't really like a meeting that we were kind of ending. It was more
because the only time I remember that it was like the end of the Liaisons officially. Like I think we had met for a drink, and you had said you're taking a break sometime.
Yeah.
And then we did that show at Bushwick Public House for your friend.
Right.
The show.
Yeah.
And you had talked about how you were doing more solo open mic stuff.
Yeah, I started going open mics by myself.
You started going open mics, and you weren't super interested in doing the Liaison stuff anymore. And then you came across this gig, and you're like, hey, let's do a Liaison show. And Ryan wasn't really sure if he wanted to do it. And I think that's why I was like, why don't you do it?
Yeah.
Like, that to me was like, that was it for that band.
Yeah, I think so. I don't even think that I don't think I had suggested we do the Liaisons. I think I knew I wanted to do it by myself the whole time. But what was interesting was I love this part of the story just in terms of how you and I started working on this project together. Was I told you about this gig that my buddy was doing where it was a lot of electronica type music.
Mm-hmm. Which is really funny.
But he wanted me to kind of open up for him, which was kind of weird. But I'd had about a dozen of these guitar songs that I'd never played, that I just hadn't done anything with, and so I played that night and got a good response and just really enjoyed playing them. And to my surprise, before that night, I'd showed you the songs, and you took it upon yourself to hire a backing band, gave them all the chords, and so I was playing these songs with your backing band for the first time without having done a practice beforehand. So it was a really interesting...
Without ever knowing what the songs actually were.
I had no idea what they were going to sound like. And it was really cool. It was this organic thing that just happened, and you expressed interest in recording my songs with me. And so it kind of... We started demoing. I think it was... what was it? Beginning of 2016 we started demoing. I can't
remember if you... like, what I remember is that, like, I wasn't doing anything at the time. Like, I always had this weird dry spell in April, which is finally being broken this year. But like April, I would always have nothing to do. I would have like 2 gigs, maybe at opposite ends of the month. And I think you just said you wanted to do the show and you wanted to do it alone. And I think I didn't let you because you really wanted to play.
You really wanted to play.
Really wanted to play. So yeah, I mean that's kind of funny because I think I've told you this before. Of the 4 bands or something crazy I was a part of when I first went to New York, I would have never said, because like the first impression and like the bass player we had in that band was like, he's not going to be listening, but he was atrocious, and like he's a great guy, but like it kind of brought like the quality of the band, and like your songs were the reason why I kept doing it, but like I didn't think we would last 6 months,
right?
But the fact that we did is a pretty good. We lasted as long as we did, and all these other bands left around is a pretty good tribute.
Yeah, I mean, but mostly the decision to record on my own and to leave them had a lot to do with just me growing up as a musician, and then also just the frustration of getting a band together. I mean, that was really the hardest part. I remember there was a point in the summer of like 2014 where I'm like, we're going to practice this many times a week, we're going to do this many shows, and everybody looked at me like I had 3 heads, and they're like, that's never going to happen. I can't commit to that. Like, and It's tough. I mean, as a musician, especially if you're like the sole songwriter, it's tough to get people as interested in your stuff as you are, and nobody's going to commit to it like you are. And I've been grateful for you.
That's the thing that I was asking, why you formed a band, because like I always kind of saw you, like I didn't see myself as part of a band, because I always knew like it was basically it's your songs. If I came up with a part you didn't like,
right,
it didn't matter or hurt my feelings. You wanted me to change it.
Right,
It's your
right.
song.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Part of the reason I wanted to do a band originally was because I know nothing about drums. I mean, even now when I try to explain drum parts to you, I sound like a 7-year-old. I mean, I can't even articulate a lot what I want even from drums. And frankly, I wasn't a skilled enough electric guitar player to want to be able to put those parts down, but I did want those parts. And so it was more about just, it was my project. It was more like hired guns than it was a band, really. I mean, I didn't pay you guys. You got paid at the gigs, but it was more that type of situation for sure. There was collaboration, and you guys all had input, but it definitely was more of just like my songs and then you guys, adding to them.
I'm sure that couldn't have been easy, because like bands usually have that kind of diffuseness of creative control.
Right.
So
it was tough for sure.
Yeah, if you were, I can imagine being like the main songwriter and having band input on it. Like I can't imagine that was easy.
It was tough. I mean, the thing about songwriting too, and you always have a vision of a song when it's in your head, and it's never going to be like what it is when it's finished. So it was always a push and pull between like what was working with the band and then what I had in my head. And I tried to make that match as much as possible. It'll always fall short, but, I think I wanted the band. I think the band, too, was something for me to hide behind as well. I think I was also still a little bit shy about performing and, liked it being under somebody, a different name, the Liaisons, as opposed to Jondan Ziskin. And even now, I still struggle a little bit with my identity in terms of Jordan the musician and Jordan the person. Yeah. Because, as you know, those are two very different people. And the content of my songs, though, are true and ring true to me as a person, it's not... I think most people would be surprised that I write songs like that once they get to know my personality a little bit. Yeah. Because I am, at least... So I act like carefree and like fun and
so then, obnoxious. I mean, what was the point where you just wanted to go for it and record? Because I know like it took me a long time to get to that point with my record of just like getting to the point where I wanted to record again. So and like honestly the breaking point for me was working with you on your record with Mike and like figuring that like I could probably do something like that. So like what was it for you? Like did you just get a breaking point where you just wanted to go for it?
Yeah, so it was a combination of a couple things. I mean, I got employed at the time at a high school. I was working as an in-school tutor, and I was actually making some really good money there. And so I was saving up to, I had a little bit of cash to throw at something. But in terms of the creative aspect of it, I felt a little bit disappointed by the quality of the EP. In retrospect, we had rushed it. We should have never rushed it. We made a lot of beginner mistakes. I mean, and having gone through the process once, I knew the mistakes that we had made and what needed to be done. And so I had these 10 songs. And really, the catalyst for going in, I was this time thinking, like, I need to find a producer. I need to find somebody who knows what they're doing. And you wanted to be involved, and you wanted to help me produce it.
Which is really funny that you chose me to do that. I mean, why... So you wanted a producer for that type of guidance?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I knew, originally, I wasn't sure that I was going to immediately bring you on just because we were friends. I mean, what happened was
and honestly, we didn't know each other that well.
We didn't, that's true. But
we hadn't had our Scalia conversation, which was when I was like, hey, this guy's cool. I mean, our Ginsberg conversation.
There you go. Scalia Ginsberg, the opera. Love that opera. No, it was more of, we started putting together demos, and the first song we did in a demo was 3 Dimensions, and you just had some really good ideas about the drum part fit really nice. You really made that song come alive in a way that I hadn't heard it for the first time, and that was really cool because that was the first time where I had a vision of a song in my head, and it actually came out better. And what we were doing on that demo, I would just listen to that demo every day. I was just so excited by that one demo, and that was a really exciting time. And we started doing it with more and more tracks. And it was about that time we went, started going shopping for studios. And
so it wasn't really until we actually started working on it that
it was
were convinced that it could happen.
Yeah, I got really excited once we actually had these demos and kind of took our time with it and picked the songs from the list that I had and started working on them together, that I saw the potential for this and got excited by the prospect of this project.
So how long did it take to get to Mike?
So what happened there, I think this was the beginning of 2016 that you and I...
Like, we went... I only remember going to one, but I know that you went to a bunch of studios.
Oh, I went everywhere. Yeah. I mean, I went to everywhere from, like, I saw studios where the guy had been doing it since 1986 and had worked for, Atlantic Records and then wasn't. I went to studios of, like, a 21-year-old kid in his dorm room, like, still putting it together, and everything in between. And I went to studio after studio, and I was not going to find a place until it felt right. And I was getting very frustrated. It was about a 2-month process. The way I found Continental and our awesome engineer Mike, who helped engineer this album, was from one of the open mics I'd gone to. One of the guys who plays there, he had this video of him playing in a studio on his Facebook, and it was just really high quality, both the video and the recording. I was more interested in the recording aspect of it, of course, but it just sounded really crisp, and I've heard him play live, and he's a great musician, and I heard him do it, and I just saw the credit, like, at Continental Studio, so I just called the guys up, and I show up at this giant, it looks like it's an abandoned warehouse in the middle of Long Island.
Disgusting building for such a nice place to be in. Like,
you think it is. I mean, it's funny. You walk in there's like this old elevator shaft from like 1925, and
that works every Thursday.
Right, that works every other day. But you go up it, and they had this studio in place, and it was just awesome. I got a really good vibe from them very early on, and it was the sort of thing where they're like, look, come in for a day. We'll just do one day. We'll record, see how this one goes. Let's take the first song, record it over 2 days actually. And if you don't like it, then you just have this demo that you can do, and you can keep shopping at other studios. And we vibed with Mike really well in the beginning. It was just I felt like a lot of people who I was talking to were not really as interested or had the skill for one reason or another, and Mike seemed like a guy who had both. And we just booked a Saturday and a Sunday. I think it was in like...
Is it May?
May 2016. May
2016. Like end of May, yeah.
End of May, we booked 2 days, and we recorded 3 Dimensions.
What really impressed me about that is we did a lot of setups for that.
Yeah.
Like, still, I think because we spent the second day doing your vocals mainly, but that first day was like 4 or 5 different instruments.
Yeah, we did so much.
Completely different.
The irony, I think, of the whole album is that we did that song in 2 days, and we spent a lot more time on other songs, and I think that one probably came out as one of the best, which is, just shows you what.
Well, like, and unlike, I was actually thinking about this earlier, like, some of these tracks we did a lot of prep work on.
Yeah.
Like, I think 3 Dimensions we did, Mexico we did, and like maybe Frostbitten or Crazy Child we did a lot of prep on.
Yeah.
And others we didn't do hardly any.
Yeah, there were some that we just needed to get in there and experiment with.
Like, Broadway's the one to me that, like, I know I had like layers of confidence every time we went in, but I had no idea how to do that track.
Right.
Like, no idea.
Mexico too was another one.
Mexico was also tough, but Broadway was just like a blank slate. Like, I think you were doing your acoustic guitar part, and the entire time I was just sitting in with an electric guitar with Mike, just fiddling because I had no idea what to play on it.
And there was definitely aspects of that. I mean, even we had, I'd say, like half of it was figured out ahead of time, and then half of it was just kind of winging it.
Yeah.
And anyway, just to go back into the story, we did the song over the 2 days. It came out great, and so we decided to take the summer to do all the demos. So we demoed the rest of the album. I think there was only maybe 2 or 3 that we just didn't know how we were going to do. I know Frostbitten Heart was one of those songs we struggled with, but we went into the studio, and then it was over the next 5-6 months. We did, drums all in one day, and then it was going from song to song to song. And when it came time to record vocals, I actually needed a little bit of vocal surgery.
So delayed us a little bit.
Yeah, I had a vocal node like my hero John Mayer and Adele and so many others.
You're just
and,
putting yourself in such great company.
yeah, right. Yeah, you know, us nodies who are. You only get nodes if you're good, right? That's how it works.
So like, so talk about Three Dimensions then. Like, where did that song start?
So Three Dimensions was one of my oldest songs that's on this album. There's only two that I wrote before or during college, and that was one of them. This was about a long-term relationship I had with a girl in my sophomore year, where we worked at the same summer camp together, but when we went back to school, it just became too difficult to see each other. And so we would Skype, we would talk a lot, and so it was just kind of about having a long-term relationship and the difficulties that go along with that, and the how you can be so far away from somebody, but then they're on you're Skyping with them and you feel like you're with them, but you're sort of not, and just the tension of having to be far apart and knowing this is somebody you want to be with, but just having circumstances separate you.
Now, you thought of this as like a really romantic love story. And I think I was the one who brought up to you, like, this is a sad song for a little bit. Because, like, whenever I heard it, I always thought of it as a breakup song.
Right.
I mean...
Well, there definitely is that in there, and on purpose.
It's a pretty,
there's, like... Yeah.
Even, like there's maybe one... Like,
well, there's the line, we're breaking up slowly.
Yeah.
And that's the line.
And that's in every chorus. But, like, you maybe have, like, one or two... Like, I think you really... Because you wrote some love songs and stuff like that, you really only have one. I would say Frostbite's the only, like... Well, Frostbite and Mexico are the only, like, love songs. Because I know you wrote stuff as love songs,
right.
but they're not...
Well,
I mean, did it...
So my view of the love song is... I don't like just writing, I love you, you love me, we're a happy family, like, no, I mean...
Besides that time you got sued by Barney.
Right, exactly. I think it's important with a love song that you add something interesting to it. And, like, I know I referenced them like 5 times already, but going back to John Mayer's Daughters, I mean, that's a love song about, a guy struggling in a relationship, like, almost pleading with the father, like, treat your daughter right because I need to love this person. And that was such an interesting take on a love song. And I try to do that same sort of thing with love songs. So even in Three Dimensions, that's a love song about being in love, but knowing that it's probably going to go away, but still trying to be happy in the moment with it. And it's subtextually, it's almost a song about coming to terms with a breakup that's about to happen.
See, that's pretty mature for a 20-year-old to write. Like, aren't many people who would write even poetry that's kind of that weird and dark. Like, it's a very adult thing.
Yeah, I mean, when you're like, a nihilist at like 16 and you think the world's gonna end. I mean, but more so than that, it was I didn't want to write something. I didn't want to write just to write. Like, I really wanted to write to connect in ways with people that maybe they hadn't thought of before, or to present an idea in a way they hadn't thought of, because just writing the same old love song doesn't really do anything anymore. There's nothing interesting about that. And so with all of my quote unquote love songs are in the context of something else. I have a couple of these. To jump to one that I wrote a couple of years ago, Never Gonna Go is the third to last track on the album. And this is a song, it's a love song, but it's a love song in one of the most fragile moments when you've just had a gigantic blowout fight. And it's about being at your worst with somebody, but still knowing that you have this undying love for them. And, it's not just I love you when everything's good. It's I love you even when things are falling apart and it seems like, this is all going to crumble away.
I gotta say, like, of all the stuff that we recorded, I think you might agree with me. Never Gonna Go is one of the hardest ones to like nail down.
Yeah.
I mean, not only because it's tough on your vocal range.
Yeah.
Like, it's way.
I don't write for my voice.
But I remember, like, when we did all the piano stuff, we did them at a place that had a baby grand in Shelter Island, and like Shelter Island's a little expensive, so we crammed as much into like 3 or 4 hours as we could.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember, like, just getting the piano part to sound as emotional as the vocals as the lyrics are was even.
Yeah.
Like, I think we spent a good chunk of time doing
Yeah,
that.
that was tough. I mean, and even as a performer, that's something, you know, when I'm performing it live, I can get into it a little bit more easier. But I do get a little bit stressed out in the studio, because if you make a mistake live, it's forgotten in 2 seconds. And the studio was this permanent sort of thing. And so I think I was a little bit too focused so much on making sure it was right that I lost the emotion. So it took a couple of takes to really get into it. And I think we just took from one take.
Well, yeah,
it ended up just
we eventually
being,
just took from one take, but it took, like, I remember, like, we did 2 takes of you just playing it, and you were playing it kind of loud and aggressive. I don't know, it was this weird, like, bonding moment, because I walked into the studio and sat far away from you at one point, and, like, was like whispering, like,
play it to me.
Play it to me.
Yeah.
And then you played.
We made sweet
so
love
what
that
I did
night.
is, and when that didn't work, I still, like, inched even closer.
Right.
And that's how we got the take. Like, that's the only, like, producer.
I think it helped actually playing it to someone.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of love for you, John. So it was easy to get into character there. No, the production side of that, despite being a simple song, was difficult because, again, the vocal range was tough there, and it's this weird sort of song too that it starts out very fragile in the beginning, and you sense tension, and then at the end it really builds into like this blowout fight that's going on, and it gets more aggressive, and the balance. I was trying to really balance like the fragility in the beginning with the anger at the end, and have that come out in the piano playing and in my voice.
Yeah, and it was just, I don't know, it was a hard song to finish production on, I think, as well, because, like, there were points when we just wanted to do a lot with it, and we ended up taking away, because we recorded a bunch of vocal tracks and like 3-4 track vocals, and we ended up just taking that stuff away,
Right.
just because it was covering other things up.
Yeah, that was one where I fought you a lot on that. I didn't want to get rid of those
Yeah,
backing
it's
vocals.
one of the very few things we butted heads on.
Yeah,
a
but
lot.
I think you ended up winning out, and that was just hearing from everybody. They were like, if I'm told I'm wrong by enough people, I'll give up. But I still like those backgrounds, but I guess it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, this is going to be an odd segue, but since we started talking about the tunes, how long does it take you to finish one? What's your process from, like,
beginning to end?
Yeah.
It's really it varies a lot. So I have this song called Sunsets, which is actually it's the last track. It was on the EP I recorded as well. So this was one that I wrote as a teenager, but you and I loved it so much we decided to include it. That was a song that started in 2008 and wasn't finished until 2012. So that was one that, like, I had a verse and a chorus for about 4 years and didn't know what to do with it until the end. And finally, I just revisited it like 4 years later and was able to put a bridge on it. Then I have a song like Mexico, where I had this riff from 2011 that I had it was just a guitar riff, just the guitar lick that's in the beginning of the song. And then it was always stuck in my head. And in 2015, I revisited it, just moved it up a couple of keys, and then I wrote the song in about 3 days. And so it really varies as to whether or not I have like a clear vision for what it wants to be. And sometimes I get stuck, and sometimes it all comes out at once. Like, it's just like you just have an amazing night where, like, you can write it all in 20 minutes and it's all there, and the shell is perfect. Never Gonna Go was one of those as well, where it only took a couple of days. And then you have some that you just labor over, and it's just killing you, and you've made 20 drafts of the same song, and you've moved parts around, and you've changed the lyrics, and it really depends. And I don't know if it shows in the songwriting, but it
I mean, it seems all pretty easy. I guess the other question I want to say is, how much of the audience do you think about
a lot
when you're writing?
I think about the audience a lot. I think any good songwriter has to, because you have to think about, how is this being perceived? I know what I mean with every lyric. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know the girl it's about, like, I know everything. But it's so important to me that someone who doesn't know anything about me can at least listen and relate. And so, there is that push and pull between trying to find something that's specific and true to me, but also general enough that people can relate to. And if you're writing from an honest place about yourself, I mean, we all go through very similar experiences, even if they're not exactly the same. And so as I'm writing, I'm
constantly trying to put myself in the shoes of someone listening to it, and does the story I'm trying to tell make sense? Does it unfold in the way that I think it's unfolding? Does this line have the meaning I want it to? Is how obvious is it? How obvious do I even want it to be? All of those are things that I'm considering as I'm writing.
Do you think the same way sonically, like in terms of like writing a verse? Because I started analyzing my own writing process in order, like, in preparation for this, and one of the things I'm starting to do, even as a jazz musician, is try to consciously write interesting things to myself.
Yeah,
like that sound interesting to me. Are you kind of the same way? Do you start with things that sound interesting instead of things that are interesting? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It has to catch my ear first. I mean, of course. I mean, you're always going to write something that sounds interesting to you. I have, this filter that anything I come up with stuff all the time when I'm like in a writing mode, but it always, I choose very selectively what I'm going to write a song about, and what riffs I'm going to use, and there's something that I can play, but I'll be like, I feel like I've heard this somewhere, or this isn't particularly interesting, or you could just buy somebody else's record and hear this if you wanted to. I mean, C to F to G, unless there's something cool going on, isn't too interesting. You have to have some sort of spin that's yourself, and that is going to be interesting to somebody else.
So when do you commit it to paper? Like how much of the music do you have thought out? How much of the frame do you have before you start writing stuff on paper?
I will write something down once I get really excited about it. I mean, it's that sort of thing where I know kind of right away if something speaks to me. I have a good sense of what my ear likes, and so, I mean, the first thing I'll do, if I come up with a riff that I like, I'll just pull out my phone and just make it, just record it audio, just so I don't forget it. That's the first thing. And then sometimes when I feel like I really want to sit down with an idea, I rarely write out chords, actually. I mean, and even writing out the music, I don't really do. I'll write out lyrics, but the music, I memorize immediately how to play what I'm playing. And if I'm that interested in it, I'm going to play it 100 times. I always record it the first time, so I do know if I have to like go to sleep or something. I start writing lyrics. I'll only start writing lyrics for something that I feel has potential, and it's tough to explain like where that comes from, or why I choose some things over others. I really do try to pass it through a filter of, is this interesting? Has this been done before? Is anybody going to care about this? It's funny. I hear like some singer-songwriters talk about how like they write like 100 songs in a year or something. I could never write 100 songs in a year. I couldn't do it, like, because most of them would just be shit.
Yeah, and there'd be a lot of crap to
right,
by the end of the day.
A lot of and I think just as a good exercise for somebody starting out, it's probably a good idea. I mean, that's what I was doing when I was starting out. I was writing tons of songs just to get it out. But once you kind of know what you want to be doing, at that point, I try to get as selective as possible, and really only start getting deep into an idea if I feel like it has potential. And there have been times where I've started and never finished, and a song didn't come together in the way that I thought it was going to, or with the example of the song Mexico, where I had a riff in one key and 4 years later moved it to another, completely changed the speed of it, and then came up with a song. But yeah, I mean, mostly with songwriting, it has to be something that is going to be interesting to myself and to somebody else. And going back to your other question, you have to keep the audience in mind. You have to know who you're playing for too. I mean, that's an important thing as well. Like what experiences is your audience having? Why would they connect with this? What's in it for them?
With that in mind, where does Mexico come from then?
Yeah, so Mexico is a fun story. So that one's kind of, you best described it actually to me. You're like, it's a fantasy, which I wrote the song but didn't think about it in those terms. But it's basically it's about just grabbing the person you love and just saying, we're going on a trip to Mexico, and it's about starting this fantasy lifestyle of just like, we're gonna live this life without rules and just do anything we want. And it's of course a fantasy. That's not how any life gets to be. But Mexico came from a place. It was in 2015. I'd just broken up with a girlfriend, and I was just very like open and looking for someone, and I just had this fantasy of the woman that I wanted in my life and what I would do, and just this whole thing of just running away together with somebody. I ended up meeting that girl a year later, but
There you go.
but
I'm gonna edit that so it makes you
perfect. But the idea behind that was to just tell this love story of just getting to leave it all. And Mexico in the song is really more of a metaphor than an actual place. I mean, it's more of just like leaving the country and just living this life where we're just driving around, exploring the world. And there's a song about the main theme that comes that's in the song is "We just keep moving onward now," and that's repeated in every verse, and it's the refrain at the end, and it's just about moving through life with this person you love and just getting to really experiencing all of it in its glory. And I'm not as I'm not as eloquent describing the song, because I really do think that it speaks on its own. But that one just came out in 3 days because it was. I love the imagery in that song. The imagery really spoke to me, and that's a song too where I'm really hoping that people can connect with. Just like the lyrics in the first verse, especially. We'll drive till we run out of gas, and we'll walk till our shoes turn brown. I'm getting my own lyrics wrong, but tanks full of gas. We'll drive till it's gone, and then we'll walk.
Promise you actually wrote these songs.
And then we'll walk till our shoes turn brown, and it's just about adventuring and the freedom and the song, and the feeling of that song is so free and fun and just this adventure and obviously doing the drums, we put in like the kind of like the train drum sound of like the chicka 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 going through the whole thing, and it's just the whole song is about just taking this wonderful adventure with the person that you love. And
so in talking about the actual track part of it, I mean, in general, how different was this from like either in Mexico or the entire album? How different did the songs come out from what you were imagining? Like take Mexico for example. What were you originally thinking about Mexico? Because there's a lot of stuff on.
Yeah, Mexico's actually pretty close to what I had. I mean, I didn't know it would be those particular guitar parts, but I knew I wanted to have this like atmospheric, ambient sound in the back the whole time that we have. We kind of have a G chord going through the whole thing, or whatever key it's in. I play it in G because I capo, but we have this background chord, and I definitely wanted that train feel. I mean, that was something that you and I spoke about from the beginning, to have that there. But a lot of cool things started happening just from playing that song at gigs a lot. I started coming up with new licks because I was just getting bored with the same parts, and we ended up throwing a couple of those licks in. And
you put a lick in the bridge, like when I thought we were done. You put a lick in at the bridge. That's like it's a great little piece. Like there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of little things in that track that we tried to put in there.
That was one of the ones we didn't really know what we were doing going in, but we had so much fun just piling on the mandolin part. There's a little bit of like an organ in the background throughout the whole song. There's all these different guitars and playing different parts, and it's
not even stuff that you can hear here.
Yeah,
like
it's like deep in there. You have to really listen for it.
If you can hear the mandolin, like if you can really hear it, I'd be like really surprised if someone comes up one day and says the mandolin's my favorite part of the track. It's just never gonna happen.
Well, the mandolin's one chord, so I hope it's not their favorite part.
But like, so going in, you kind of had like some idea of some of the tracks, but were any that were just like completely different from what you were thinking?
Yeah. So Frostbitten Heart came out nothing like the way I thought it was going to be. This was one that started on acoustic. We ended up recording it on electric.
Well, and we used to play it in the Liaisons. So we had a bias. Yeah. We recorded that track twice.
Yeah, we had. Oh, we didn't record it twice. We played it. We didn't record that in studio.
Yeah, we did.
No, we did Burning All the Money.
Oh no! Sorry, I was talking about when we did it for this record.
Oh yeah.
Because when we did it like the Liaisons.
Yeah, we ended up scrapping the first version of it, and it just we ended up changing the tempo. There were a lot of issues with that song. The way it came out now, though, it took on a feel that I didn't think it was going to take on, but I really like it.
it's less of what I thought it was going to be, but it's more of like this groovy little gem that's towards the end of the album.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's just this little interesting thing. It's a little different from the rest of the album.
But like nothing else that went drastically.
No, for the most part, I mean, most of it followed our demos pretty well. I mean, we didn't have an idea of Broadway, but there's some instrumentation on there that's a little bit different. Like I didn't know we would be doing the Rhodes keyboard in there.
Yeah, neither did I.
Yeah, but there are some cool parts. But for the most part, I mean, they all ring pretty closely to what I'd wanted them to be. Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of them think of me as just me on a guitar. That's what that always is going to be. The song Crazy Child, we ended up adding a 12-string, which was really cool. So there's 2 guitars going on top of each other there. And we redid one of the old songs from the album, from the first Liaisons EP. We did Sunsets, and that definitely took on a different vibe than what we had the first time.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, probably Frostbitten Heart and Sunsets for sure was just a little bit different. We brought in a new guitarist to really lay down some solos. And
I think people will be pretty surprised the amount of work that just you and I did.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, outside of...
The credits on this album are going to be kind of crazy.
They're going to be a little crazy, but, like, outside of the guitar solos, which were done by Carl Markgraf, and a handful of bass tracks, is usually just you and me on these
yeah,
tracks.
we play everything.
Yeah, like on 3 Dimensions, it's literally you, me, and Caitlin singing backup, but... I mean, not that I can sing backup. That's the reason why.
Yeah, we do have to give your wife credit.
We do have to give my wife credit.
She background vocalist and vocal coach for me.
Yeah.
So that was very, very helpful in the studio.
You know, and I was thinking about not necessarily Sunsets because Carl did add a lot of guitar to it, but like I'll Be Waiting and Mexico have like Mexico especially has like 16, 17 tracks.
Yeah.
Or something like that on there.
Yeah.
And, like, it's still amazing to me that the only other person on that is Aaron on bass.
Yeah,
like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, I play guitar. I laid 1 bass track down, I think. I played most things at a piano. I mean, I think most impressive is what you added because you're a drummer.
Because I can't really play.
Well, because you don't play these instruments usually, but you have quite a few guitar parts and quite a few the Rhodes, the keyboard parts, and so you were really you came up with a lot of ideas in studio that I never thought were going to be anywhere, and it was kind of interesting how we built upon it too. You know, we did take a long time to do this. We started in 2016 in May. We're nearly at the 2-year point now.
But I mean, we weren't like in there a lot. It's not like we've been in the studio every day.
Yeah, no,
for the last 2 years.
I mean, mostly the production was finished by summer last year for the most part. I mean, it's just been in mixing and mastering for now.
And even then, I think we might have. I mean, this entire process, even with the mixing and the vocals, we might have put in 6 weeks of studio time.
Yeah, I'd say so. If you did it back to back, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's pretty remarkable how many tracks we ended up doing in a really short, like we did Broadway in 3 hours, maybe even less than that.
Well, I mean, we did all the drums back to back to back, so there was that aspect of it. But in terms of recording I mean, there was only a couple of guitar takes, and then we just kind of messed around with it for a few hours. That definitely was a quick one. But then you get into ones like, you know, the Mexico sessions took a long time. Frostbitten Heart we redid completely. You know, I'll Be Waiting was one of those big production songs that took quite a bit of time. There was a lot of debate as to background vocals and to different parts there.
That's the thing I don't think I've ever really asked you, is how did you actually like being produced? Because you've never been produced. I've never produced anybody.
Right. It's a good question.
Like, to be perfectly honest, if now someone came to you with this idea of you're going to have this jazz studies major who has never produced or played on a pop record before, he's going to come in and produce your album.
It was, I mean, like, so you proved yourself when it came to the demos. I mean, that was really it. I mean, I didn't have any high expectations until we started demoing together, and you clearly had an ear that worked well. I mean, just because you came from a jazz background, that, you know, I'm sure it helped, but it you know, it wasn't like you could only do jazz. It definitely.
But then how did you like actually being produced?
It was helpful. You know, I still felt in control of everything, and when it came down to it, like all the, you know,
it was always my choice at the end of the day, for sure. I mean, I don't think there were too many places that we didn't agree on, and you won out in some places, I won out in some places. But in terms of like having you there to direct me, it was nice having a team and not feeling like I was fully responsible on my own, because I think it's an important part to be able to recognize your own blind spots, and I know I have them. And that's usually the biggest anxiety for me. The most anxiety comes from, am I having a blind spot here? Is there something that I'm not seeing? And I'm always so careful trying to analyze myself and to make sure that this thing works and is that I'm able to produce the vision that I had. And you and I, pretty much saw eye to eye on what that vision was going to be when we were making the demos, and then we were in the studio. Very infrequently did we have huge disagreements. I mean, I can't even think of the only ones that I think were huge were like mainly came down to some background vocals, and on Never Gonna Go you won out, and on some of the other songs I ended up winning out.
Yeah.
But in terms of instrumentation, I mean, we you came up with, I'd say like 90% of your improvisation that you did is in the album. I mean,
probably
you came up with a lot of cool stuff that was not planned originally, but when you have that partnership, when you're able to work with someone, you have a clear vision in mind. I never felt like you were stepping on my toes or stopping. You were always an asset.
Yeah, and I was always trying to make sure that you were getting what you needed. I think the hardest, and this was the weirdest part for me, was like having to fight when you really believe in something, and having the balance of like, this is still his record, but I still also need him to shut up. I think anytime we butted heads, I don't think we ever got to the point where we were like,
we weren't the Eagles.
Yeah, we weren't no Eagles. I never think we got to the point where we were just doing it for our egos or anything.
No, never. And I mean, any tension that was there came from the fact that we both wanted to make a really good album. So it was like, it was always from, you can disagree with someone vehemently, but if it's coming from that place of wanting to get to the same end goal, and you also do have to have like some level of agreement. I mean, the disagreements we had were not frequent. I mean, we were mostly on the same page.
Yeah, I'd say there's only like maybe one or two times that I can really think of.
Yeah, and there were times where like you and Caitlin had to straighten me out a little bit in the studio to make sure that I was staying on track, and so it was very helpful. I felt like I had a team in there. It wasn't just me, and that's kind of what was difficult about the first time doing this, was that it did feel like it was just me. The first time recording 4 years back, I had no sense of how the studio worked. I was working with this engineer who was also himself just kind of starting out. I mean, now I'm sure he's done great stuff since, but we were both kind of figuring this out together. And so, going in this time with the experience, going in with a vision, going in with you and Caitlin, who knew what we wanted, and Mike, who we had a lot of confidence in to get us the sound that we wanted, and he did a phenomenal job in that respect. It made it all a very pleasant experience and worthwhile. And I feel going into mastering, I feel good knowing that I put 2 years of my time into this, and it feels like I'm getting something that I wanted, that I saw from the beginning.
So talking about our big production piece, I do have to ask, and I have never asked you before, what's Albie Waiting About?
Oh.
Yeah, because I've never asked you.
That's true.
And mainly because it feels like a really personal song.
It is,
so obviously
actually.
I'm going to ask you on something that I'm going to send it to a million.
No, of course, yeah. No, I'm not going to get too specific, but it's about I had family members too, actually, who were going through their own struggles, completely independent of each other, but it just so happened to overlap over a few years. And I was in the position of wanting to help this person. And this song is about like the couple-year journey I had from going through the stages of wanting to help someone, but realizing that they have to help themselves. There's only so much you can do for somebody else. And even just being able to reflect on myself, I was very depressed in my, my teenage years, but the only one who could pull me out of that was me. It had to be me. There were people who were trying to help me, but at the end of the day, it all came down to me. So this song was about kind of starting to go through the process of saying to someone,
it starts out with, I'm really sad you're going through this thing. I want to help you. It transitions into anger, into, why aren't you better? What's wrong with you? Get it together. Why are you ruining your life? And then at the end, it kind of ends at a place of acceptance where it's, look, I know you're going through this thing. I'm right here waiting for you when you get back. Do what you need to do. Get your head on straight. And, when someone, and, one of my family members was actually able to do that and to get their life back on track. And it's a great moment to just, that song for me is very personal, and it's tough to deal with someone when you want to help somebody so bad, but you can't. But if you can just be there for them, and then you see them being able to dig out their own hole, you feel this sense of accomplishment, even though maybe you didn't do anything. You were just there emotionally. But that song was really, it helped me kind of deal with my feelings about struggles that I was having with people in my family. And, I think a lot of people can relate to that of, we all have messed up families at the end of the day, and it's all, everyone, we all want to fix each other, and we all, sometimes you just want to smack the crap out of the person you love and say, come on, like, why are you doing this? But we're all responsible for ourselves, and all we can do is love each other while we're figuring it out.
I mean, it's just really interesting to me because you're not, you and I are pretty similar in this. Is like, we just don't talk, we don't go and just sit down and like, how's that person doing in your family? Like, we don't do that.
Right.
I mean, but your songs are so personal to you. Like, they seem just really personal, especially like that. And I remember you were like, you said that Never Gonna Go. You wrote that at like the beginning of a breakup.
Yeah.
And I remember saying like, this is what this song sounds like.
Right.
Like, it sounds, and like, you just have these really interesting, really personal connections to your stuff. That like, I feel like I know things about you from like doing these songs as long as we've been doing them that we've never talked about.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what music became for me, because I feel like I don't have to talk about them because this is my outlet. I mean, honestly, that's music. When I started writing, even from like, when I was coming up with just compositions when I was 10, 11 years old, before I was really writing lyrics, it was always, this way of just getting the emotion out. And I would have bad days, and I would sit at the piano and I would play, and I wasn't necessarily I wasn't writing words, but the emotion of that day, what I was feeling, was coming out in my music. And that's how, that it felt like a good way to be able to express that part of me. Just my personality, I don't like bothering people with my problems. It's just kind of the way I am.
I'm the same way.
I never, my problems are my problems. I don't want to make them your problem. But music is kind of that place where I always felt that it was a place where you could talk about your problems, and at least, the listener can at least, it's, when someone's listening to a song, it's not as much you're hearing about complaining, it's more you're hearing, oh, like, I've been through that. I get what you're saying. And that's what music was for me. I mean, one of the first, just going back to what we were talking about like an hour ago, one of the songs that got me started in writing music was a song called Dark Blue by Jack's Mannequin. And that song, there was a lyric, have you ever been alone in a crowded room? Well, I'm here with you. And I loved that lyric because, at the time I was sometimes, in groups of large people, but I felt alone, and I felt on the outside. And it was that I love music that's like, hey, come here. I hear you. I'm there, kid. Like, I know what you're going through right now. And as a teenager, you feel everything way too much. I mean, it's so nice to be in my 20s and not have to deal with feelings that much.
Yeah.
Like, you have a sense of like, I'll get over this in a day.
Yeah. I know. Like, man, I can't believe people withstood me. Like, there are parts of me when I was in college, especially, I was like, fuck, why am I single? And now that I look back after like being married now for like 4 years ago, oh, well, of course I was single.
Right, exactly.
Like, of course I was.
Exactly. And growing up, it's painful. Like it's really difficult to the transition from kid to adult is just the hardest thing in life, because you are shedding your skin in a way. You are learning to mature and to deal with your problems. You get to a point where you just can't cry to mom anymore. You have to learn how to do it yourself. And everybody takes these things from childhood that haunt them, and that they never got over, and that they still carry that with them as they learn to be an adult. And that really shapes who all of us are.
And I forget the point of the question.
Whatever. Here, we're going to another tune.
Yeah,
This is even better.
Sure.
So, I remember, especially when we were doing Sunsets, you had a feeling of it for a while. You felt like it was getting a little Beatlesy.
Yeah. Because you wanted to put like these oohs in the back.
Well, yeah, I picked the wrong vowel.
Yeah,
but,
you did.
I mean,
oh no, it was Oz. What do you want to put in there?
I think I'll be waiting. I wanted to put in Oz.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Oohs.
Yeah. That's where I'll be waiting became Beatlesy. Yeah.
I'll be waiting started becoming Beatlesy.
Yeah.
But I mean, you and I have talked about the Beatles a lot, and we make fun of them most of the
Hello,
time.
Paul.
Paul. But just how, like, it's really hard. I think it's really hard to make a record, and you can definitely tell the records where people haven't at least thought about, especially those later albums. I mean, how much of that did you embrace in the recording process?
How much of the Beatles did I embrace?
Well, how much of that aspect of the Beatles, like, as far as like some of the parts are kind of similar. Like, did you think, like, were you especially on Sunsets where it gets really big, like, did you have any like apprehension, especially or just in general, did you have any apprehension about your influences becoming too clear?
Yes. Less Beatles though. Yeah. I still worry that Mexico is too John Mayer. I mean, no, seriously though, like, I mean, yeah, I could tell a little anecdote. You and I played a show last week, and the band that went on after us was literally, I mean, it might as well have been a John Mayer 2003 cover band, because the guy wrote his own songs, but every single one just sounded like a different John Mayer tune.
Right
that he
down
just
to the way he said words.
Yeah, right down to the way he did everything. So Mexico's the one I fear the most, because that had a big, the big influence for that song was 3x5 off of John Mayer's first record. I hope it's different enough. I still worry. I wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats. It's 3x5. I definitely took inspiration from that song without a doubt. So that was probably the biggest instance of worrying that I was like taking an idea too far. I hope, I threaded that needle well enough.
Yeah.
And I think I did. I think I worked on my vowels and not doing too many ahs, and Caitlin helped me make sure I didn't say things like him, and I tried, I tried not to. Frostbitten Heart also has a lot of John Mayer in it as well. But that's kind of why I like the piano tunes, balancing things out. I got to show a different side of me. And there are a lot of songs here that don't have any traceable influences. But, I mean, in terms of the Beatles, I mean, it's definitely in there. Like, there's definitely, I don't know how much of it was conscious. I'm sure a lot of it's unconscious. But the biggest, in terms of worrying about influence, those Frostbitten Heart and Mexico were the two where I'm like, am I getting a little too John Mayer? I hope I'm not. I hope I'm doing this in a little bit of a different way. And so I like that I have songs on there. I mean, 3 Dimensions is all mine. I don't think that sounds like anyone necessarily. It just sounds like a singer-songwriter, but I don't know if that sounds like anybody. And then I have a couple of the other tunes as well. Most of the tunes I'm not too worried about.
So, then what's Sunset's about? Anyways, because that's one of the ones that has more obtuse lyrics.
Yeah, Sunsets is kind of interesting. That one is one of the few that I... that is a little bit like difficult to read, and that's on purpose. But Sunsets I wrote that when I was 16, and that was about the fear I had of my grandfather dying. I was 16. He was, I think, 82 at the time. He ended up living till he was 90. So I had
We've had this discussion. Like, both my grandparents lived. Actually, all but one of my grandparents lived to 90.
That's
so
great.
We're gonna live forever.
I hope so.
That's what we got. That's what we got to figure out now.
But I had a very close relationship with him, and he had one of the things that I admired about him was just he had such a deep faith in God that I don't share. I wish God was there. It'd be nice. I don't know, frankly. I have no idea. But he had such a faith in his life, and he was this guy who was like, when he was 16, he was involved with a bad group of guys during the Great Depression, and then just like, 19, decided to enlist in the Air Force. His plane got shot down, and he was swimming with sharks, and nearly died when he was 19. And the rest of his life, you know, he went through. The rest of his life from that point was basically a gift because he was supposed to die when he was 19. And the attitude that he was able to have late in his life was such a beautiful thing where, you know, he would talk to me very openly about, you know, one day I'm going to go and
that's also what Crazy Child's about too.
Similarly, it's Crazy Child a little bit less, not as directly about that, but in Sunsets, the idea behind that song, I Can See All the Sunsets Now, was just about the moment of going, and the way that I imagine he viewed dying, and Sunsets was mostly about just, you know, learning to love your life in the moment, you know, coming to terms with, you know, your own mortality and learning to just be okay with that. And that was the toughest, you know, one of the reasons I was so, you know, nihilist as a kid. You know, you're a kid and you think you're going to live forever, and then you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm getting out of school now, like life's moving on, and you know, wait till you know, I'm only 26 now, wait till I'm like 40.
And, oh God, we're gonna be messes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, I'm sure that lesson only gets harder and harder as you get older. But I wrote this song in anticipation of having to deal with my grandfather's death. I didn't have to deal with it until 8 years later, but he did die during the production of this, and it's a beautiful song, and it just reminds me about his attitude on life, and it's such an important one to have, because when you get older, the easiest thing to do is to get bitter. It's so easy to get bitter, and you know, I've seen it from a lot of people. You know, I'm 26 now, and I don't have too much to be bitter about. I'm sure it's easier said than done. Talk to me when I'm 90 and see how happy I am about the world. But if you can have that attitude and just be thankful and just look at death as like just the ending of this phenomenal story, and I can see all the sunsets now. I got it all in front of me. I get to look at every wonderful moment I've ever had and, you know, go out with a bang, so to speak. Yeah, that song had a lot of meaning for me, and it was I loved it to end the album on. Yeah.
Well, and it's also, we made it a tune that's hard to follow.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, like between 4 double track voices and 4 or 5 guitars, it's a kind of a perfect ending for everything. So, you know, Don't Let Me Down is from the Liaison years. So is Frostbitten Hard. I mean, that's another tune I think we talked about them. Do you think that it was easier to do those or harder?
Don't Let Me Down easier, because we had done that in another studio, and we had a pretty good sense of what it was going to be.
You wrote that while the band was still together.
Yeah, I did.
But
and we were playing
later on, right?
Yeah, so I wrote that in the summer of 2014. I'd just gotten back from Israel. I did Birthright, and if you don't know, Birthright's the free trip you get for being Jewish. You get to go to Israel for 10 days, and they try to convince you to live there and to join the army, and then you say no, and then you go back home. But
sounds like they do a great job.
Yeah. Oh, it was such an incredible trip. And it was just, you know, to be immersed in that culture, and, you know, the songs about just not wanting to come down from a high, and just, as soon as I was back, I hadn't played my guitar in 10 days. So it was just so organic and easy. And this was probably the clearest departure between my old stuff and my new stuff. You're ever going to find like a line, that's probably it, because it was on guitar, it was upbeat and not depressing. Seriously, it was one of the first like uplifting songs I'd written, and it was just, you know, a lot of my songs have like these very complex parts, but this one didn't. I didn't want it to, and it felt so natural and so nice, and it was just this song that was just a beautiful celebration.
When do you think you'll make another one?
Oh God, I can't even think about that right now. I don't even know. I mean, it all depends on a lot of different factors. I mean, I haven't been writing in quite a while because I've been so focused on just the production side of this, and I have a couple of tunes that I'd be thinking about, but I think I need a new reflection period. Right? I'd love to do like brand new songs, but that's probably a couple of years down the line.
Okay, but you have some songs in backlog that you can still use, right?
I certainly do. Yeah,
You probably have 6 or 7 at least.
6 or 7. I mean, I got like 50. But like, I wouldn't record all those. I mean, it's kind of like fruit. They ripen and they rot. And so at this point, I feel like I have, a lot of good songs I've written in the last 6, 7, 8 years. But at this point, I don't know how many of them reflect me today.
Okay. I mean, do you have your title for it yet? Is it?
The album is called Crazy Child.
It's officially Crazy Child.
It's
Because
official.
it started as Crazy Child, and then it started as something else. Then it was Crazy Child. Then it was something
The
else.
album is called Crazy Child.
Now it's back on Crazy Child.
Yeah.
Speaking of Crazy Child, since we just talked about it, how did you like playing all instruments for an entire track?
That was cool.
Crazy Child is just
Yeah.
you.
So it's just me on an acoustic 6-string guitar and an acoustic 12-string guitar, and then my voice. That was really cool. I mean,
And piano. You're in pianos.
Oh yeah, that's right. There's piano. I forgot there's piano at the end. Yeah, that is a pure solo. That and Think of Me are the only ones where it's just me. But I love that song. I mean, that was a lot of fun to do, to just layer on top of myself so many different times, and then the way the 12-string really came together on that song really, I think, makes this beautiful, complete sound that feels so, just so nice and satisfying.
I mean, would you? The other big question I have is, would you do another album in this vein, where like it would be like you and a producer, if it's me or not, doing most of the bulk of the work, and then having other guys come in to do specific things?
Yeah.
Or would you want to do like kind of what Linden Street did, where you get guys in a room and see what happens?
I don't know if I'd love that, because I think more the first way. I like the way we did it. There is definitely something to like just having an organic sound and just going in there as a band, but I think of music very thematically, and so for me, music is about the storytelling of it, and I pay very close attention to the way the music matches that feeling, and I think I kind of go through with a laser focus in terms of the music and try to make it match as much as I can. So I think it's important
really,
to be able to like.
It really has to do with the control aspect, like keeping it with a small group.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think it would have, like, how close do you think we would have gotten if we got a bunch of session guys? Because I mean, there were parts of me that thought about doing it, because it honestly would have saved a little money in studio time. But yeah, I don't know
how you get Mexico with that. I don't know how you get what we did for I'll Be Waiting, or for a lot of them. I don't know if you end up getting to the end place, and I'm very happy with the end place.
So I mean, do you like this as a good example of your sound then?
Yeah. Oh yeah. This, I mean, the songs are very, very relevant to me over the last, 5, 6 years, and the album's called Crazy Child because that song in particular is about growing up. We spoke about this a little while ago, but it's the most difficult time in a person's life is going from childhood to adulthood, and that's what that song's about. Just kind of knowing you're in this transition period. That song is the things I wish I could tell myself when I was 16. Just like, you don't have it all figured out just yet. You don't know anything. Just do your best. It's all right. It's all right, kid.
So, I mean, this is gonna be, this is pretty big, because this is the first time you did like a full blown album. And it's pretty good that it's something you're comfortable being associated with. I guess, do you have any fear if this gets locked in, like something crazy happens, the record gets huge? Do you have any issue with the idea of being locked into this?
I have zero issue with that.
No, you think you'd be good with if having pressure to do a similar sound on the next record, or do you like having more flexibility?
I mean, it's only pressure if you let it be pressure. I mean, I look, in my wildest dreams, if this thing were to blow up, and I had some big wig record producer, "You're gonna do the same thing, kid," like coming to that. I don't know. I don't worry about things like that. Frankly, I love these songs. I'm gonna write how I'm gonna write, and I can't even imagine a world in which I'd be having big wigs breathing down my neck. But if it worked, if in this world it worked for me doing it this way the first time, I would, I'd have a lot of confidence in myself, and I would trust that's the way it has to go.
Yeah. So you wouldn't feel the need to automatically give something different.
No.
Right.
I mean, I haven't written in a little while, so I don't know. I wouldn't want to produce the same 10 tracks for sure. I mean, I'd definitely be interested in taking my music in a different direction, but I don't know what that would mean, whether it be thematically, whether it be musically, whether it be both. I mean, I don't have a clear vision for what's next. I'm kind of focusing on what's here now.
So you're mastering it. When is it? Like, do you have a date set when you want it to be out yet?
Yeah, I'm looking for the fall, for sure.
Fall?
Yeah, I'd love it to be out by then. To the people who contributed to the album, we started a Kickstarter. Those people are going to get an early copy for sure, and a copy of the first music video for the lead track, Mexico. Mm-hmm. And so, but yeah, I'd like to have full release by the end of the year.
Okay, it's not too terrible if you're getting it mastered by the end of the month, maybe.
Yeah,
or maybe
probably.
earlier.
I think yeah.
Wow.
By the end of April, yeah, it should be.
Yeah, and are you going to start doing a lot of shows then?
Yeah, I'm hoping to. So definitely, during the summer, I'm going to pick up a lot more. I'm hoping to play a lot in New York and to maybe start going outside too, playing neighboring states, going to Boston, going to Connecticut, playing shows a little bit in the Northeast, and see if people like what they hear.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, it's exciting. Exciting times.
Hey, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for being. Thank you
pleasure.
for allowing me to force you to be on it. We'll do another.
It was great.
It was great. It was great.
I'm excited to do yours.
What's your name again? George?
George, yeah.
George. Okay.
People call me George on the phone all the time.
Why?
They just fucking do. They hear Jordan, like I maybe mumble the last syllable.
So you just sound like
Yeah. I swallow it.